Chapter 1. A Morning Gone Wrong. Jack Turner had seen a lot in his years living on the outskirts of Willow Creek. From a neighbor's goat escaping and leading a parade down Main Street to a group of kids who once tried to turn his barn into a haunted house, nothing really surprised him anymore. But when he woke up that Tuesday morning, something made him question reality itself. His red tractor, the one he had spent years maintaining, the one he had worked countless hours on, was missing. Not stolen in the middle of the night by a professional thief. Not sold by mistake. Just missing. And worse yet, he didn't have to look far to find it. Across the property line, bold as day, there it sat. His tractor. And there she was, Evelyn Carter, his insufferable neighbor, perched on the driver's seat as if she had just claimed her kingdom. Jack blinked, rubbed his eyes, even slapped himself lightly on the cheek. But the vision remained unchanged. Evelyn, with her signature smug smirk, gripping the wheel like she had just won it in a county fair. The sheer audacity was almost comical, if it weren't so infuriating. Jack wasted no time storming across the field, his boots kicking up dirt as he marched like a man on a mission. "Evelyn," he bellowed, his voice cutting through the crisp morning air. "What in God's name are you doing on my tractor?" Evelyn didn't even flinch. She adjusted her oversized sunglasses, peered down at him, and then had the nerve to laugh. "Oh, Jack," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I thought you weren't using it, so I decided to put it to good use." She waved a hand dismissively. It was just sitting there, abandoned. Jack felt a vein in his forehead threaten to burst. "Abandoned?" he seethed. "It was locked in my barn." Evelyn shrugged, completely unbothered. "Technically, you always leave the door unlocked." That was a lie, and they both knew it. "So you just helped yourself?" he demanded. "You weren't using it," she said matter-of-factly. "And I had some landscaping to do. Besides, it looks better on my land than yours." Jack's mind struggled to process the sheer level of entitlement radiating from her words. This wasn't some minor misunderstanding. This was outright theft. He inhaled deeply, trying, desperately, to keep his temper in check. "All right, this is real simple," he said, voice tight with restraint. "You're going to climb off that tractor, walk back into your house, and I'll forget this ever happened." Evelyn crossed her arms, that smug grin widening. "Oh, I don't think so, Jack." His patience snapped. "The hell it isn't." Evelyn pulled out her phone, her perfectly manicured finger hovering over the screen. "If you don't stop harassing me on my property, I'll have to call the authorities." Jack let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You're going to call the cops on me for trying to take back my stolen tractor?" "I prefer the term rehomed," Evelyn corrected, tilting her head as if she was some kind of tractor adoption agency. "And yes, you're trespassing." For a brief moment, Jack considered yanking her off the seat himself. But that was exactly what she wanted. Evelyn thrived on drama. She was the type of person who would scream bloody murder over a misplaced fence post just to get the homeowners association involved. No, this required strategy. Jack took a step back, held up his hands in mock surrender, and gave her a slow nod. "All right, Evelyn," he said, voice eerily calm. "You win this round. But let's see what the sheriff has to say about it." As he turned on his heel and walked back to his house, he heard her call after him. "Go ahead. I'll tell them you gave it to me." Jack didn't bother responding. He went straight inside, grabbed his phone, and dialed the number he had memorized years ago. Sheriff Dale Montgomery picked up on the second ring. "Turner, what's the emergency?" Jack's grip on the phone tightened. "I need you to come down to my property. My neighbor just stole my tractor, and she's refusing to give it back." There was a pause before the sheriff sighed. "Let me guess. Evelyn." Jack pinched the bridge of his nose. "Who else?" "All right, I'm on my way." It wasn't long before the sheriff's car pulled up, kicking up dust as it rolled to a stop in front of Evelyn's property. By now, Evelyn had parked the tractor like a trophy in her yard and was standing beside it with an air of ownership that made Jack's blood boil. As Sheriff Montgomery stepped out of his vehicle, Evelyn immediately switched into victim mode. "Oh, thank goodness you're here, Sheriff," she said dramatically, placing a hand over her heart. "Jack has been harassing me all morning. He's making wild accusations, and I just don't feel safe." The sheriff gave her an unimpressed look. "Evelyn, did you take Jack's tractor?" She gasped as if the mere question was an insult. "Take?" "No, Sheriff. He gave it to me weeks ago, and now, for some reason, he's changed his mind." Jack threw up his arms. That is the biggest load of. The sheriff held up a hand. Calm down, Jack. He turned back to Evelyn. Do you have any proof of this alleged gift? Evelyn smiled sweetly. Oh, Sheriff, do we really need to get into legal formalities? It was a verbal agreement between neighbors. The sheriff glanced at Jack. You ever say anything about giving her your tractor? Jack clenched his jaw. Not unless keep your hands off my property counts. Sheriff Montgomery sighed, clearly exhausted by the situation. Evelyn, you can't just take someone's vehicle and claim ownership. Evelyn folded her arms. Well, Jack doesn't have proof that it's his either. Oh, you want proof? Jack shot back. I've got receipts, registration, and pictures. Give me 10 minutes, and I'll bury you in paperwork. For the first time, Evelyn's confidence faltered. But she quickly straightened her shoulders. Well, until then, possession is 9/10 of the law, right? Sheriff Montgomery exhaled sharply. Evelyn, I strongly suggest you return the tractor before this becomes a real problem. Evelyn smirked. I'll think about it. Jack clenched his fists. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Chapter 2. The Sheriff's Verdict. Jack watched as Sheriff Montgomery adjusted his belt and pinched the bridge of his nose. He had dealt with Evelyn's antics before, but this was an entirely new level of ridiculous. Evelyn, the sheriff sighed, you know I can't just ignore this. You took Jack's tractor without his permission. That's theft. Evelyn scoffed. Oh, come on, Sheriff. Theft is such a strong word. I simply borrowed it. And if Jack had a decent bone in his body, he'd see that I'm putting it to good use. Jack was ready to explode. Borrowed. You broke into my barn and drove it across the property line. That's not borrowing, that's stealing. The sheriff held up a hand. Jack, calm down. He turned back to Evelyn. You either return the tractor right now, or I'll be forced to write up an official report. Evelyn crossed her arms. Oh, please. What jury in their right mind is going to side with Jack? He's always been selfish about his equipment. Jack's jaw clenched. You're insane. Sheriff Montgomery sighed, clearly over the situation. Here's what's going to happen. Evelyn, you're going to return the tractor. Jack, you're going to provide all the paperwork proving it's yours. And if this isn't resolved by the end of the day, we're going to have a much bigger problem. Evelyn rolled her eyes, but didn't argue. Jack knew this wasn't the end of it. Chapter 3. The Paper Trail. Jack stormed into his house, rifling through his filing cabinet until he found exactly what he needed. Receipts, registration, and even a warranty document, all proof that the tractor was his. He made copies, just in case Evelyn tried anything slick. As he returned outside, he found Evelyn sitting on the tractor, looking utterly bored. I suppose you think you've won, she said, inspecting her nails. Jack held up the paperwork. This is all I need. If you don't return that thing right now, the sheriff is going to have you arrested for grand theft. Evelyn snorted. Oh, Jack, you're such a drama queen. But there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Get off my tractor, Evelyn. With an exaggerated sigh, she finally dismounted, though not without making a show of wiping imaginary dust off her pants. Fine. Have your stupid tractor. Jack climbed onto the seat, gripping the wheel like it was the most precious thing in the world. He turned the key, the engine rumbled to life, a sweet sound of victory. But as he drove it back toward his barn, he had a nagging feeling in his gut. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Chapter 4. A New Scheme. The next morning, Jack found a notice taped to his barn door. He frowned, pulling it off and reading the neatly printed text. Dear Mr. Turner, due to recent disputes over property use, I have filed an official complaint with the Homeowners Association regarding your possession of heavy machinery. Your tractor is an eyesore, and I will be formally requesting its removal from our shared community space. Kindly prepare to comply with regulations. Sincerely, Evelyn Carter. Jack read the note twice, his blood pressure rising with every second. Evelyn was trying to use the HOA to force him to get rid of his own tractor. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. This was war. Chapter 5. The Community Strikes Back. Jack wasn't going to let Evelyn push him around. He knew the HOA could be a pain, but he also knew something Evelyn didn't. He had allies. That afternoon, he called up his friend and neighbor, Martha Collins, who had been dealing with Evelyn's antics for years. When he explained the situation, she laughed. She's got another thing coming if she thinks she can just dictate what people can and can't own, Martha said. Let me make a few calls. Within hours, word spread through the neighborhood. Other residents who had their own grievances against Evelyn began showing up at Jack's property, armed with their own stories of her scheming ways. By the evening, a full-blown town meeting had been called at the community center. Jack stood at the front as residents took turns airing their frustrations. "She tried to have my garden beds removed for being too unkempt," one woman huffed. "She told my kids they couldn't ride their bikes on the sidewalk in front of her house," another added. The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement. Jack smiled inwardly. If Evelyn wanted a battle, she was going to get one, but she'd be facing the entire community, not just him. Martha took the podium, clearing her throat. "I say we file a counter-complaint to the HOA. If Evelyn wants to play dirty, let's remind her that we can play just as hard." A cheer went up from the crowd. The war had officially begun. And Jack wasn't fighting alone. Chapter 6. The HOA Showdown. The day after the town meeting, Jack woke up early and headed straight to the HOA office. He wasn't going to wait for Evelyn to make the next move. He was going to strike first. As he stepped inside, he found a few familiar faces from the town meeting already there, including Martha and a couple of other neighbors. Evelyn, dressed in an absurdly formal pantsuit, was seated confidently at the table, her arms crossed as if she already knew she had won. The HOA president, Gerald Whitman, adjusted his glasses and looked between the two parties. "All right, let's get straight to it. Evelyn, you filed a complaint regarding Jack's tractor, claiming it violates HOA regulations. Jack, you filed a counter-complaint stating Evelyn has been harassing multiple residents. Let's start with you, Evelyn." Evelyn smirked and sat up straight. "Thank you, Mr. Whitman. As I outlined in my complaint, Jack's tractor is an eyesore. It doesn't belong in a residential neighborhood, and it disrupts the aesthetic value of our community. I believe it should be removed immediately." Jack scoffed. "It's private property, Evelyn. You don't get to dictate what I can and can't own." Martha raised a hand. "And let's not forget the fact that Evelyn stole said tractor before filing this complaint. Shouldn't we be addressing that first?" Gerald sighed. "Jack, do you have proof that the tractor is legally yours?" Jack slid a folder across the table. "Receipts, registration, everything you need. I can also provide security footage of Evelyn sneaking onto my property and taking it without permission." Evelyn's face paled for just a second before she regained her composure. "This is outrageous. I was only borrowing it. And besides, the real issue here is the tractor itself. It's ruining the harmony of our community." Another neighbor, Greg Simmons, shook his head. "The only person ruining the harmony of our community is you, Evelyn. You've harassed half the people in this room. And you know what? We're tired of it." The murmurs of agreement filled the room, and Gerald had to raise a hand to quiet the crowd. "Enough. I think I've heard all I need to hear." Evelyn smirked, sitting back confidently. Gerald folded his hands. "Jack has provided clear proof of ownership, and based on the statements here, it's evident that Evelyn has been a source of conflict within this neighborhood. The HOA will not be forcing Jack to remove his tractor. In addition, Evelyn, consider this an official warning. If any more complaints of harassment arise, we will take further action." Evelyn's expression darkened. "You can't be serious." Gerald gave her a pointed look. "I am, and I highly suggest you take this opportunity to reflect on how you interact with your neighbors." Jack grinned as Evelyn huffed and stormed out of the meeting room. The battle was won. Chapter 7. A Peaceful Victory. In the days that followed, the tension in the neighborhood started to ease. Evelyn, humiliated by the outcome of the HOA meeting, kept a low profile. She still shot glares at Jack whenever their paths crossed, but she was noticeably quieter. Meanwhile, Jack's neighbors were more united than ever. The shared experience of standing up to Evelyn had brought them together, and the neighborhood felt lighter, friendlier. One evening, as Jack was enjoying a quiet sunset on his porch, Martha walked up with a plate of fresh-baked cookies. "Thought you might like a victory treat." Jack chuckled, taking a cookie. "I'll never say no to that." Martha sat down beside him, looking out over the field where his tractor sat, still right where it belonged. "You know, Jack, this whole thing might have been a headache, but in a way, it brought the community closer together." Jack nodded, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon. "Yeah, and it showed Evelyn that she can't push people around forever." Martha grinned. "Here's to hoping she's learned her lesson." Jack laughed. "Somehow I doubt it." But for now, peace had been restored in Willow Creek, and Jack intended to enjoy every second of it.